Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. On my 18th birthday, I received a gift that would change my life. I knew my grandmother was planning something special, but I never imagined she'd give me the entire family company, a company worth millions. It was something she'd built over decades, a business that had grown from a small enterprise to a major player in its industry. My grandmother, who had raised me and taught me everything I knew about hard work and resilience, handed me the papers with a smile, saying, "I trust you'll carry on our legacy." I was in shock. This wasn't just a gift. It was an inheritance of responsibility, a symbol of her trust in me. She knew I was planning to go to college, and I was passionate about the family business, but I'd never thought she'd actually give me full control. I was excited, but also a little overwhelmed. The company was her life's work, and now it was mine to oversee. However, my mother's reaction was far from what I expected. She had married a new husband, Robert, about a year ago. Robert was a businessman, or so he said, and my mother believed he had a golden touch when it came to handling companies. She seemed to think that because Robert had experience, he'd be the best person to manage the company. I, on the other hand, had spent years learning directly from my grandmother, working every summer and holiday break, shadowing her, and getting to know the ins and outs of the business. I may have been young, but I'd practically grown up in that company. The day after my birthday, my mother came over to my apartment, furious. She didn't even bother with a happy birthday or ask about my plans. She went straight into demanding that I do the right thing and sign the company over to Robert. According to her, I was too young and inexperienced to run a company, and I'd just be setting myself up for failure. She insisted that Robert had been handling businesses for years, and that he was the only one who could keep the company growing. "It only makes sense," she said, leaning in, her eyes cold and determined. "This company should be in Robert's hands. Your grandma should know better." I was floored. Here was my own mother, dismissing all the work I'd put into the company, all the sacrifices my grandmother had made to pass it on to me. My mother didn't seem to care that my grandmother had chosen me intentionally. She acted as if it were her right to control who managed the family business. Her entitlement left me speechless. I calmly explained to her that this was my grandmother's decision, and she made it clear to me that she wanted me to run the company, to continue the family legacy. I told her I had no intention of handing over something so meaningful to Robert, especially when my grandmother had trusted me with it. But she wouldn't let it go. She started yelling, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying that I was too immature to understand the company's real value and that I'd ruin it within months. She even went so far as to say I didn't deserve the company and that Robert was the only one who could protect it from my reckless, childish decisions. The conversation turned ugly quickly, and I finally told her that I was done discussing it. The decision had been made, and I wasn't going to betray my grandmother's wishes. My mother stormed out, slamming the door, telling me that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. Later that evening, my grandmother called me to check in and see how I was feeling about the company. I shared what had happened with my mother, half expecting her to scold me or tell me to consider my mother's perspective. But instead, she burst into laughter, something I wasn't expecting at all. I was stunned. Here I was, stressing over this whole ordeal, and my grandmother was laughing. "Oh, darling," she said, still chuckling. "Your mother may think Robert's the answer to everything, but she has no idea who he really is." My grandmother went on to reveal something that completely blindsided me. Robert was cheating on my mother. He'd been having an affair with his secretary for months. Apparently, my grandmother had heard from reliable sources within her business circles, people who'd seen Robert and his secretary together at dinners, on business trips, behaving in ways that left no doubt about their relationship. She'd kept this information to herself because she knew what my mother's reaction would be. First of all, Mom and Grandma have a strained relationship. And also, she knows my mother would not believe her. Robert completely charmed my mother wrapping her around his finger. "Your mother has always been, let's say, impulsive," my grandmother sighed. "She jumps into things without thinking them through. This is exactly why I wanted you to have the company. You're patient, thoughtful, and dedicated. I didn't spend my life building this business to watch it be destroyed by a man like Robert." The relief that washed over me was immense. Not only did my grandmother fully support my decision to keep the company, but she also had absolutely no respect for Robert. In her eyes, he was a fraud, a man with a track record of failed business ventures who'd somehow convinced my mother that he was her ticket to success. My grandmother assured me that she had no intention of allowing Robert anywhere near the family business, and that if my mother continued to push, she'd confront her with the truth about Robert's affair. Over the next few weeks, my mother continued to pester me about handing over the company to Robert. Every conversation with her seemed to end in an argument, with her accusing me of being ungrateful and disrespectful. She'd even send texts and leave voicemails telling me I was throwing away the company's potential by keeping it out of Robert's hands. It was exhausting, and I began to dread every time she reached out. Eventually, my grandmother had had enough. She invited my mother over for a serious talk at her house, and she asked me to be there too. My mother arrived with Robert in tow, looking smug and confident, as if they were about to persuade me with some foolproof argument. I could see Robert eyeing the house and its decor, probably imagining himself in control of everything our family had built. He even had the nerve to smile at me and say, "I'm glad we're finally talking about what's best for the company." My grandmother didn't waste any time. She looked Robert straight in the eye and asked, "So, tell me, how's your secretary doing these days?" The room went silent. Robert's face went pale, and he stammered, clearly taken off guard. My mother looked at my grandmother, confused. "What does that have to do with anything?" she asked, glancing at Robert, who was now visibly uncomfortable. "Oh, quite a lot, actually," my grandmother replied, a sharpness in her voice I'd never heard before. "I think it's important for you to know, dear, that your husband has been seeing his secretary behind your back. I've known about it for months. I was hoping you'd see it for yourself, but I guess love makes people blind." My mother looked at Robert, her expression shifting from confusion to shock, and then to a kind of hurt and betrayal I'd never seen on her face before. Robert tried to deny it, mumbling something about business dinners and professional relationships, but my grandmother wasn't having any of it. She pulled out a folder filled with photos, proof of Robert's affair. She slid it across the table to my mother, who flipped through it in silence. With each page, her face grew paler, her hands started to shake, and her eyes filled with tears. Robert sat there, speechless, probably realizing there was no way out of this. "I wanted you to have a partner you could trust, but it seems you chose poorly," my grandmother said, her voice cold and unwavering. "And that's precisely why I gave the company to my granddaughter. I can't trust you to make good choices, especially if you'd let a man like Robert into our family business. I built this company with integrity, and I'm not about to let it fall into the hands of someone who has none." My mother was devastated, and I felt a strange mixture of sympathy and relief. She had been pushing so hard for something that was never hers to control, blinded by her trust in Robert and her desire for him to run the company. And now she was faced with the truth, that Robert was nothing more than a cheat, and that her push to give him the company had only embarrassed her. In the end, my grandmother made it clear that the company would remain mine, that I would continue the family's legacy, and that if my mother or Robert ever tried to interfere again, she wouldn't hesitate to take further action. Robert left that day in disgrace, and my mother, humiliated and heartbroken, hasn't brought up the company since. As for me, I feel a renewed sense of responsibility and pride in the gift my grandmother gave me. She believed in me when no one else did, and she trusted me to carry on her life's work. I'm determined to prove her right and to honor the legacy she built, knowing that it's mine to continue, free from anyone else's influence. Not the a-hole. Your grandmother sounds like a wise, amazing woman who knows exactly what she's doing. She's built this company from the ground up and trusts you to carry it forward. And I think it's clear why she didn't choose your mom or her husband. Props to her for exposing Robert's affair. Stick with your grandma's wishes, OP. You're going to do great things with the company. Your mom's sense of entitlement here is astonishing. Demanding that you hand over the company to her new husband? It's like she doesn't even recognize the hard work and dedication you've put in with your grandma. The fact that she pushed so hard for this, only for the truth about Robert to come out, is poetic justice. It must have been tough dealing with your mom's constant pressure, especially with something as big as inheriting a family business. It sounds like you've earned this opportunity, and your grandma clearly trusts you. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're too young or inexperienced. You have the right support and the heart to make it work. You've got this, OP. Your grandma is a total legend. The fact that she calmly let your mom push until she finally had enough, then exposed Robert in front of everyone? Absolute queen behavior. She obviously knows what's best for her legacy and trusts you to carry it forward. I hope you continue to make her proud, OP. You're lucky to have her in your corner. My, 22 female, and sisters, 20 female, P. Parents divorced when I was 7 years old. It was expected. Their marriage was arranged and they tried making it work but ultimately couldn't. The divorce went smoothly. Since Mom was a stay-at-home mom, Dad agreed to continue paying for her expenses and also arranged for me and P to see a therapist once a month so we could express our emotions in a healthy environment. At 14 years old, my dad married my stepmom. She and her daughter, Elle, 10 at the time, moved into his house. P hated them from the get-go, behaving like a brat whenever Dad wasn't around, and constantly making comments about Elle's body, race, and background. Stepmother and Elle were kind to P, hoping she'll eventually come around, but P wasn't interested. I tried to convince her to give them a chance, but gave up eventually. Over the years, P continued harassing stepmother and Elle until she got her karma when all the insults she directed at Elle reflected onto her. Last week at my dad's birthday party, he opened Elle's gift and got emotional. Inside were adoption papers. The two hugged and Elle had a speech about my dad being an amazing father figure, to which P scoffed. It was rude, but not unusual behavior on her end, so we ignored her and continued with the celebration. After the party, P and Dad went outside for a smoke while the rest of us went to bed. I couldn't fall asleep, so I went into the kitchen and saw Dad in the living room with a very drunk P hovering over him. It was then that I heard her say how she found it comical that Elle called him a good father, since he couldn't be one for her. She went off and said that if he was a good man, he would have never divorced our mom, and that thanks to his incompetence, her life was now horrible. She also said that she's informing him that if he agrees to sign the adoption papers for his fake daughter, he could lose his real one. Dad just sat there and cried. Growing up, he tried to be as involved as possible in our life, so P telling him he was horrible broke his heart. I stormed over and asked her what she thought she was doing. I yelled at her to stop blaming our parents' divorce for her being a failure. Her being miserable with life had nothing to do with our parents, and everything to do with her decisions and nasty attitude. I dragged P outside barefoot and told her she is no longer welcomed. She cried and asked to bring her phone, since it was cold outside and she was drunk. I firmly told her no. She can either walk to our mom's house or stay outside for the rest of the night. Now my entire family is arguing. Some support me, saying she had it coming, and some tell me I'm wrong for treating P that way, and to forgive her since she was drunk, jealous over not being my dad's youngest anymore. I'm starting to feel a bit bad. What P did was horrible, but leaving her outside barefoot and drunk in the middle of the night without a cell phone put her in a lot of danger. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I feel like I have to mention this. Our mother's house is 20 to 30 minutes walking distance from where my dad lives. Edit update. 1. Dad left Mom his house and moved to a new one 20 minutes away so he could be closer to us, and so we wouldn't be under any stress about moving. He attended every sports game, every dance recital, and was nothing but loving towards us. No one was the favorite child, and we were all treated equally. My dad didn't choose Elle over P. He wasn't the perfect father, but he sure was one of the good ones. 2. P was rude even before the divorce. I have no way to explain it, but she was just born with it. If anything didn't go her way, she'd automatically resort to violence. She's been in therapy since she was 5 up until now. I've been told she is making some progress, but clearly not enough. 3. This whole incident revealed a lot of stuff P did over the years, and Elle is finally being brave and speaking up about it. In the past hour, Elle agreed to let us look through her texts with P. We found messages upon messages of P calling Elle racial slurs, along with threats and other unpleasant comments about her weight. This has been going on for years. We are absolutely horrified by it, and I'm amazed Elle didn't snap and never told anyone what was really going on. We are all ashamed we didn't realize what was happening sooner, and are doing the best we can to get Elle the help she deserves, despite her claiming she doesn't need it. 4. And although I agree what I did last week was wrong, and kicking P out in such a manner was a reckless thing to do, in light of recent events, I wish I did give her back her shoes by throwing them at her head. I'm going with everybody sucks here, except for stepmother and Elle. You because you put your sister in a dangerous situation. Your dad for not stopping P's behavior when it started. P because she's being a self-centered brat. Having said all of that, I feel awful for your dad and stepmom. I get why you did it, and I'd be tempted too. Just take safety into consideration. Everyone sucks here. I was on the side of saying not the a-hole until you refused to give her her phone or shoes, forcing her to walk barefoot for 20 to 30 minutes. Your parents' divorce clearly had an effect on her, but at some point she started making her own choices. So she's definitely in the wrong, but you treating her the way you did was completely unacceptable. Not the a-hole. P was going way too far and somebody needed to put her in her place. Probably should have left her with her phone and shoes. But there was a lot going on in the heat of the moment, so not blaming you. Little backstory here. I, 28 female, have a little sister, 14 female, who we'll call Lily, who is extremely afraid of dogs. Her dog phobia happens only with big dogs, after a Rottweiler knocked her to the ground when she was 10. Also, my sister is living with me as my parents have gone abroad, and we both are extremely close. We live in a big house which can easily accommodate 3 people. This happened a week ago. My aunt was going through a messy divorce, so she moved in with me and asked me if she could bring her dog with her. Now, this dog is extremely large and tends to get overexcited with children. And taking into account Lily's fear of dogs, I refused. At first, my aunt took it well and gave the dog to my cousin, her daughter, who lives 3 hours away and says she'll look after it. So a week ago, my aunt asks me if she can bring the dog for visits outside of our house. I agree, as long as it's in the backyard and the dog is on a leash. I reminded her to not let him inside the house. Lily agreed and said that she has no problem as long as the dog does not come close to her. My aunt brought the dog over and Lily just stayed inside. I played with the dog a bit and then I went to the kitchen to cook dinner. Suddenly, I hear Lily screaming at the top of her lungs and I go to the living room. She's climbed on top of the sofa and the dog is at the bottom of it, barking at her. My aunt is telling Lily to come down and it's just a silly fear, the dog won't hurt you, etc. I was furious. I immediately took the dog outside and screamed at my aunt for what she had just done. I kicked her out and now she's staying with her daughter. My mom called me yesterday and told me that I had no authority to do that. I told her I did and that any sane person would do the same thing. My cousins also called me and told me that I did a heartless thing, that my aunt's daughter doesn't have space for my aunt and that she needs a home. I don't feel like I'm the a-hole. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole 100%. Your aunt knew how your sister reacts to dogs and agreed to not let her dog inside. Then she broke that promise. Also, no, it's not a silly fear, and what the duck? Not the a-hole. She scared the crap out of your sister on purpose, and just as importantly, she willfully lied to you and did not keep her word. Absolutely not. She agreed to conditions with no intention of keeping to them. This person cannot be trusted. Update. My aunt called Lily about a half an hour ago and called her a spoiled brat for getting her kicked out and told her that she, the aunt, wished the dog had hurt Lily. I called my aunt back and it escalated into a heated argument. My mom called me and told me that I needed to apologize to my aunt and welcome her back home, as it is technically her childhood home. And I told her that it was not her home, as my grandparents left me the house when they died. What do you guys think? Should I apologize? Also, I'm planning on taking in Lily as my parents are permanently staying abroad. Update 2. My aunt, we'll call her Diana from now on, was kicked out an hour ago by her daughter after she left the dog loose in the house. The dog destroyed more than a few items. She's apologized and asking if she can live with us because she is essentially homeless. What should I do? Update 3. This is the final update, thankfully. Lily called up our dad, who wasn't aware of any of this by the way, and was crying as she talked to him. He understood, as he had a dog phobia as a child too, and chastised my mom and Diana, and further followed up by calling up all the family members and cutting off Diana. She's a fully grown adult with a steady income and therefore could afford a hotel room. Apparently, she had enough money to buy an apartment at short notice. Buy, not rent. And eat well for a year without any income. So she's bought her own apartment. Allows pets, by the way, and she got it fully furnished. Should have just done that in the beginning, and yes, Lily is well now. She says she forgives Diana for what she did. I haven't. Not the a-hole. Cut off that weeotch of an aunt, and any family member who says you were at fault here. Even your dumb boyfriend who called you overreacting. I feel furious reading the story and the update. I'd be livid if anyone does that to my daughter. I can't believe your mom sided with the witch instead of her own daughter. Take custody of your sister and tell the rest of them to screw off. I've been married to my husband for almost 3 years, and we have 2 kids, twins, female and male, 15 months. My husband has 2 older sisters. He is the youngest of the 3. I've always got along with the younger sister-in-law, but not so much with the older. She has always been very judgmental towards me, and we had countless arguments in the past, but a couple of days ago, we got into a big fight. My kids got the flu, and it's been a rough week for both me and my husband. My mother-in-law and father-in-law have come to stay with us for a few days because I got sick too, and I was exhausted, so they offered to help me. My mother and father-in-law had taken our kids for a walk in the evening, as they had for the past couple of days, since they were getting better and sister-in-law happened to be around here, so she joined them with their youngest daughter, 12 years old. She returned soon and came over to our house and began complaining that since both of her parents were out for a walk with our kids, they couldn't take her daughter to her friend's house, and she would have to do it herself. My husband drove our niece to her friend's house eventually. She began blaming me that I was irresponsible and forced her parents to babysit my kids. She insisted that they had no business to take them for a walk and that this was my job. She even accused me of being a bad housewife and pointed out that the house was a mess, that I didn't clean and didn't cook. My husband defended me and said that she shouldn't be judging me about something like this because she raised 2 kids as well and she knows the struggles. Well, to keep it short, she said many ugly things, but what hurt the most was that my parents were right for kicking me out, and they were probably now living much better without me, and that I didn't deserve to be in her family. I lost it there and told her to shut up. She got upset and pushed me, and my husband had to get in between us and yelled at her. I told her to leave my house and never come back. We talked about this with my husband's younger sister, and she believes that we are both to blame and that we shouldn't have exchanged such harsh words. She disagreed that it wasn't right to keep her away from us, because no matter what happened between me and her, my husband and my kids are still her family. Now that I heard another person's perspective, I'm thinking that I might have handled the situation poorly. My husband's family is really close together, and after this, my husband doesn't want to talk to his sister. And my mother-in-law and sister-in-law also had a big fight with her when they heard what happened. I feel like this is all my fault. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole in any way. She says her parents have no business taking your kids for a walk and it's your job. But apparently it's fine for them to take her kids somewhere, and that is somehow not her job. She then throws a tantrum about her parents not being able to help her because they're already helping you, and instead of just doing it herself, ends up getting your husband to do it for her. Then she proceeds to personally insult and criticize you because your house isn't 100% clean while you're all sick. Not only are you not the a-hole, you're absolutely right to tell her to get out and not come back. And to be honest, I wouldn't be letting her back in until she apologizes. She's a grade A hypocrite who wants other people to do her favors, but also criticize you for accepting favors. Younger sister-in-law can join her if she thinks you're being too hard. My father passed away somewhat recently. He had just bought a brand new truck. When my father died, my mother was taken care of, but barely. Blue-collar boomers. She has income, but barely breaks even. So this truck isn't just a truck. It's an asset she needed to turn into money to live on. Nevertheless, my mother is a saint of a woman. My little cousin, 26, was in need of a new car, but has no income on paper. He's a gig DJ, so can't walk into a dealer or bank, so he asked my mother for a deal. Boy, did we give him one. I could have sold the truck to a friend of my father's in cash in full, but my mother is a saint who thought she was helping family. Also, for what it's worth, when I say we, my sister and I didn't benefit from my father's death. There was no inheritance. We don't control my mother's money. We do, however, spend a lot of time helping our mother because she barely has a high school education, never graduated, and she often asks us for help financially. She needs whatever she has to live. She's not rich, so... The truck is worth about $35,000, $45,000 on the high end. $27,500 was the lowest I found, with $100,000 more miles, and clapped out. This truck had plastic on the seat backs and the little warning flag sticking out of the glove box. It was that new. It was agreed that he'd pay $350 a month, no interest, against a $27,500 note. He also said, and we agreed, because that's a forever loan, that he'd sell his car and give my mother the proceeds for that. My mother signed everything over, instead of holding the title, Because dumb decision. My sister drew up a standard contract just to keep things on the up and up. It's what my sister does for a living. Dude got super offended. Then, weeks later, he says his life is up in the air right now and was not going to give my mother any proceeds from his car, which she was counting on to pay off some debt she'd accrued because of lack of positive income. It became a thing, and then he sent my sister, not my mother, the money and said, for screwing me. Are we the a-holes for thinking he's being a spoiled, ungrateful brat? Also, I won't get into the fact that his car he sold was worth more than $2,500, but not the a-hole. The odds of your mother getting a $350 monthly payment for the next 6.5 years is exactly 0%, with a margin of error of 0%. Hell, I bet he doesn't make it 6 months before he's missing payments. This was a huge mistake. Not the a-hole. Cousin sounds like a selfish jerk, hoping that without you and your sister's involvement, he could save a bunch of money by taking advantage of your sweet mom.